Hi guys, my name's Jo and I am the CEO and founder of Navistar Legal. And today we have Natalie Salunke, and she is here to talk to us a little bit about the business of law and the law of business, her story in the legal profession. Welcome, Natalie.
Hi, Jo, thanks for having me.
Natalie is the former head of legal at Fleetcor, and she is the current head of legal at Havn. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about building culture within the team. I'm going to ask you a little bit about your career and how you started out, things that you've learned, the hard lessons that you've learned through your legal career, and what you're going to do next, how you are going to be building your team. So, Natalie, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I guess back in the day, I had quite an unusual start into the in-house environment. So I trained at the law firm Taylor Wessing. I qualified in 2009 when the markets were just absolutely all over the shop and there weren't any corporate jobs. And I'd done quite a corporate heavy training contract. And so, there weren't many jobs available at the time, but I was really fortunate to find my first in-house move as a newly qualified solicitor, and that was at Travelex. So already that was quite unusual at the time, because when I was speaking to a lot of the recruiters, they were saying to me, normally we expect you to have a couple of years under your belt before you kind of get, into that sort of environment, especially as a qualified solicitor in a private practice sort of, world. So, that kind of made my approach to law probably quite different to some of my colleagues. So I think whereas a lot of my colleagues had been trained to be a service provider generating revenue, I was kind of going in as a very kind of, new qualified lawyer without that sort of grounding or experience to kind of really validate, well, do I know what I'm doing? Or is there any value in me being here? So my mindset was always probably from a kind of a position of probably insecurity, going, can I actually do this? So my approach was, well, where can I add value? Because if I can add value, then that will mean that people will see me as useful to the business and want to work with me, and that should hopefully give me a purpose for being here. So that's the way that's sort of the mentality that I adopted when I approached my task. So I was brought in to Travelex, working for Claire Belcher, who's a really good friend of mine now, which is lovely. And she wanted a junior lawyer to kind of help her out with all the work that she was doing across the EMEA region. And so some of those tasks were quite kind of administrative. So if we're taking our contracts database, it hadn't really been put in the best possible state. And so I kind of took that task and kind of, looked at it. And the way I looked at it was more probably from an operational perspective. You probably call that legal ops now, but back in the day, we didn't really talk about legal operations. So what would have been seen as a very administrative task, I kind of looked, well, what's our objective? What are we trying to solve here? So if we've got all these contracts, we don't want them in a safe somewhere that we can't find. But equally, if they are in the safe, we want to be able to find them. So they need to be organised in a certain structure. We want them to be scanned in so we can actually read them quickly. But also, what are the key terms that we want readily available? Because if we've got that information, so your start and your end dates, your renewals and all these different things, then actually, well, maybe there's something in that. Equally, we had a matter management system, but were we kind of labeling it in the correct way? So yet again, I kind of looked at that more from a kind of data perspective, which we all talk about data and mapping nowadays. Back then it's like, well, what are the sort of key things we want to know to be able to really have an idea of what people are working on at any one point in time? So I guess that was where I kind of started out in the kind of, legal sector. I was quite lucky that, my career then kind of escalated pretty quickly into, probably having the confidence to think, well, actually, I'm already thinking as an operator, so maybe I could manage a department or manage myself, even if it's a small department. So I was really lucky in that when I was 27, I found this head of legal role at Venda, which was a startup, an e-commerce platform. They were looking to list on AIM, so quite interesting times for them. They'd already done some fundraising rounds. And so, at quite a junior level, I was sort of, propelled into this role that I was really worried, like, can I actually do this? And I think yet again, because it's about looking at what the business does, a lot of people that work in businesses don't have professional tags attached to them. They're business people, right? And so why are we as lawyers so wedded to the fact that, oh my God, I'm a legal professional? And that validates what I can do in terms of adding value to a company, when half the company are walking around going, well, this is just a job. I'm going to do my job. And my job is to create solutions to problems and to get stuff done. And I just find that really interesting. I think,
Such a good point. What's the label? Like, there's a labeling that we have to have. And yeah, so that's such
but
a
then
good.
if it's not enabling you, what's the point? So if it's actually acting as a barrier to getting stuff done, then what are you actually doing? So I think, having then been propelled into this role yet again, going, oh my God, I'm a bit young, can I really do this? You're looking for those opportunities to add value. And that's the constant kind of mantra that goes through. And obviously you will add value, because if you are trying to do the right thing, you're trying to do a good job, you're trying to solve problems that, were there one day and aren't the next. That's great. That's what people are there to do. They're there to get stuff done. And so anyway, so with that company, we weren't able to list on AIM, but we then sold it to NetSuite. So NetSuite was a US listed company that I ended up being the senior corporate counsel for, and looking after all the legal stuff across EMEA. It's a similar kind of iteration, but there, interestingly, being the first lawyer of a US headquartered company in EMEA. So for them, it was very new, and it was actually quite greenfield in some ways, because they'd supported it out the US before, but having somebody on the ground, how does that role interact and operate on a daily basis in a way that somebody trying to manage that from the US doesn't have that intimacy or that ability to really influence and be around people as much as, you can if you're actually physically in the same office as somebody, or you've got that proximity in terms of your relationship because you sit on their leadership team. So I think, really leveraging those kind of relationships and the positioning that my role had, which was adding value to a function that already existed, but they weren't really able to do that before because they weren't there. Actually, weirdly, I'd like to think about that now and go, well, actually, now that we're embracing the world of Zoom, are people in those roles actually going to be more effective because they're coming up with more diverse ways of interacting and connecting with their stakeholders? But, I think we're all sort of agreed that a hybrid of the two is kind of the optimum, right? We do as humans like human interaction. We do get a lot from those water cooler conversations, those things that aren't so staged as a Zoom meeting. But equally, if you can still have that kind of interaction with somebody where you're looking into their eyes, you're seeing their body language. Yes, okay, it's through a screen, it's not in person, but there's probably a lot that we could do or are doing now that we probably in the past would have just had a phone call or would have exchanged a few emails, which I think is going to change the way in which we work. So anyway, from NetSuite, I then moved to Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Similar thing again, the first kind of lawyer really managing a legal function for enterprise. Before they had a contract management function. When I arrived, we kind of created a hybrid of a legal and contracts function.
Do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy being the first in? Because it seems like, obviously in TravelX you weren't, but do you enjoy what do you enjoy about it? Joining a team as the first. Do you find it more what is it about that?
So I think it's being able to see opportunity in something that somebody hasn't already tapped into. And so I think it's probably, some of the companies I've been at, it's because they've had other priorities. They haven't invested enough in that type of environment. So, you can really get that rewarding sense of adding value pretty early on because your focus is that environment. Whereas for somebody else, it could have been a little bit of a side focus. So it never really got the investment it needed. So I think when you are brought in as that first or that newly created role or elevated role or whatever we want to call it, you're being given a platform to really kind of affect change. And that to me, I think is really, really exciting. I think it's something that, it's a real gift. And it's a real privilege to have. And so I think if you are somebody who's going into those type of roles, seeing those opportunities and really trying to do the best you can with them is part of the role. And I think if you don't get excited by it, then probably you're not really the right person to be doing that because it is exciting. You are, doing something new and you're doing something that people didn't have, as I said, probably the time or resource or potentially even the capacity or ability to do before. And I think for me, that's very rewarding because I think, as we've already heard, the theme is adding value. I obviously get a kick out of adding value.
Yeah, I was going to say that is a theme throughout everything that you do. And I totally understand with coming in as that first person and almost starting with a bit of a blank slate, even though there are things, sounds like you quite enjoy it when there are some things there, but then it's creating that next level up and then moving moving that forward. And I'm sorry, I interrupted you where just before before Fleetcor, I think, but the adding value is a real pattern that seems to go through. Is that like one of the core beliefs that you have around this role, or is it something that you're just noticing? Do you go into a business and go, right, how can I add value? Is that literally a question that you're asking yourself?
You know, it's funny because I think only from this conversation have I realised how much I'm using the word value.
Yeah, powerful.
But I think it's maybe it's because I've had a realisation over the last week or so that that's probably the existentialist crisis that some lawyers face, is that they don't really know why they're there. And I think all people in businesses want to know what their sense of purpose is. And that's how you connect with a business, right? So whether you're a lawyer in that business or not, you know, you're trying to understand, well, what am I here to do? Does it resonate with me? Does it resonate with my values? And do we have a clear sense of direction? And I think, you know, you need to think about those things when you're embarking on a new venture, because if you do, you could easily get lost and you could easily get sidetracked, and you may lose your purpose, you may lose your way, and you may not get that sense of satisfaction. So I think for me, it's about, you know, what I really enjoy actually, I think, is going into a business and not having preconceived notions. And even though you have got some pockets of, you may have an existing team, you may have a blank sheet of paper, it's that whole kind of resetting your mind and really going in and listening to what people are telling you. And it's easier said than done, but actually really hearing, not going in and going, I know this is the salesperson, oh, he's going to be an extrovert, he's going to be like this is going to be his objective, he's going to be very revenue driven. You just don't know. Have you asked the person? And I think that's the way I like to go into different businesses, is with that kind of childlike curiosity of going, well, I have actually done some research on the business because I've been interviewed for it, and I've been through probably tens of rounds of interviews to get here. So there is that there. But I think taking that to one side, taking your ego out of the equation and going, am I a seasoned professional? Have I done this before? Or am I embarking on new territory? This is a learning experience for me and I'm not sure I can do it. Taking that to one side and just going, absorb what's going on around you. Look at what you've already got. Look at the people who are already there. Ask them those open questions like, well, how have you worked with legal? What did you enjoy working with legal, if there was anything? What didn't work very well? And actually, now that you've got a new person in the role, what do you want to get out of me that you felt that you couldn't ask of the predecessor because, you know, it was a bit awkward or the relationship was already established? So let's wipe that slate clean and go, what do you want from me?
I love it. And I hear the reason that I'm so interested around the value piece is because what you said earlier was, we have a label as a lawyer. This is the message that I heard. Tell me if it's right. We put this message on ourselves. I am a lawyer. I am an in-house lawyer. I am a different type of lawyer. It doesn't matter. The lawyer piece is already in there. But actually the question that you're asking, instead of putting the label on it, is what value can I add? How can I add value? Now that might be, I can add value through my legal expertise. It ought to be in the role. Yes, I can add it through my expertise, but it may not be. It may be in creating the culture and creating a different way of thinking in the team. It may be through management. It may be through keeping people in a different way. What do you think about that?
One of my favourite things about being a lawyer in a company is that we genuinely can have access to so many different visibility across so many different functions that a lot of roles just don't have the capacity or ability to have. So you really get that almost 360-degree view of a company. And, you know, that's a real gift again. And so what do you do with that level of insight into the business that you're supporting? Do you stay in your pigeonhole and go, well, actually, this is the legal bit? Or do you actually foray into a different part of that, which is actually going, well, you know what, I noticed this was a problem for the legal team. So for example, I have, one of the previous businesses I worked for was we had a few CCJs against the company. And I was like, what are we doing? We're a really, successful organisation. We should not be getting CCJs because that's a process issue. That's not a behavioural issue. And, a company of our size would not even entertain that type of practice. But what I realised was, and actually taking that and going, well, I don't like dealing with, small claims that come into my team, because we shouldn't really be dealing with claims that are about, a couple of £100 to £1,000, when actually really all that is a customer that's been disgruntled and you haven't really dealt with that properly. So from a selfish perspective for the legal function, I don't want this stuff hitting our desk. But in order to really understand how it gets there, you've got to go back to a root cause analysis kind of model where you go, well, where does this kind of start? And so one of the things we looked at was how post was actually getting into our buildings. And was it actually being routed to the right people? And actually, was there a clear, understanding, and was it clearly articulated to those people where stuff should be going? Or was it in their head? Or was it based on the fact they've been doing this for years and, this is what they've always done? And we realised that was the exact issue. We hadn't categorised different types of documentation. We hadn't checked that these people understood what they should be. And we hadn't said, well, you need to kind of work towards very strict timelines, because if there are court documents, you could have potential 7-day period that you have to operate in. That has to have easily before 7 days have got to your legal function so they can do something about it. We also realised that some of the customer complaints weren't being dealt with in a consistent fashion. So that was a training issue. So if you've got somebody complaining about particular terms and conditions, and so I get, those complaints eventually come to me, but I'm noticing there's a trend. But then I'm actually seeing the way that different advisors are dealing with that same issue is not consistent. Then you could easily have customers who are forum shopping. And if you're giving inconsistent messages, then you're not really helping your business. So then that became is there a way of coming up with consistent messaging around these different types of legal issues that come from our terms and conditions? And have we actually articulated and trained our people who are actually the first port of call on those issues to be consistent with their messaging? And so already you can see how from something that easily you could say that's quite a selfish legal thing you don't want to deal with, but already if you take and extrapolate it and go, okay, I'm not going to just focus on the legal issue, I'm going to go, well, these problems create this issue. How can I, with my visibility and understanding as to how these things can trigger and ultimately end in that point, how can I help these guys to really understand that?
That's so powerful, and those are great examples of, and they're potentially little things, but there could be so many of them that you can. I mean, that takes a lot of time, though, Natalie. I can see, I can picture you going and work the root cause analysis. That's a huge amount of effort. But I think you talked about earlier something about data, right? You said you would do it. You would. Using data before it became sexy. You didn't use the word sexy, I use that. Before it became data, it was just information that was useful to us to find out. And it like the contract data, et cetera, now it's called data, and then there's all this AI and interesting stuff that goes around it. But finding that data out is not always easy. It's not as easy as pressing a button and going, oh yeah, we've got these 5 people who have made a complaint, which would be great. How do you manage time? How do you manage your time, not just on these complaints, but how do you split that up or decide what then has the priorities in your working world?
So I think one of the things that I've done in pretty much all of my roles is I've actually recorded my time. And I know there's a whole kind of movement against doing this, but all I see it as is a data point. And it's actually a way of I don't remember, so I've got a terrible memory. There's my little secret, right? So that's why I have to be uber organized, because I need to be able to have that information in a recallable fashion in real time, because I can't rely on my own memory, right? And so that's why I map everything that I do, because if I get those insights, then I'm not having to rely on my own brain to actually remember stuff. And that's where it actually comes from. So I map, the WIP that we're working on as a team. We record our time. And so we're actually able to create a good picture as to what's actually coming our way and what we're sort of, doing and what we're working on. And also then whether or not it's appropriate. Because I think, then can you make value judgments if you have the base kind of level of information. So trying to come up with ways, as you said, where that's not time intensive is really important. Now, you can do it with spreadsheets. And a lot of people have, especially, here we go, this is another lawyer tag. I don't do spreadsheets because I'm a lawyer. That's another thing that we say. But actually, it's one of those things that, we didn't always understand the law. We didn't go, I'm not going to read a statute book because I've never read one before and I don't like them, because I like reading things that make normal English grammatical sense. You just got on with it. And I think, if we kind of take that own barrier of, okay, we're lawyers, we like to think we're really good at everything, and if we're not good at something automatically straight away, we're not going to be happy about it. Take that out of the equation, actually, it's not rocket science, and you can pick it up. And actually, once you do, you realise there's a really good way of organising yourself. So I used to use tables in Word, and then I realised that actually you didn't have the same functionality as you could in Excel. Now, the problem with Excel is it doesn't automatically check your spelling and grammar, and there are some kind of nuances there. But ultimately, it's a much more sort of powerful tool. So if you kind of get past your own barrier to learning and actually think about, well, what are the sort of things I want to do, you can easily set something up. But then there's so many tech tools out there as well that are getting more and more cost effective, that if you had the ability or opportunity, you probably could. You said that it's difficult to get all this data, but if you program something for the future, then it just becomes an automatic process. So if you've got enough time for that, which I think we all have to do, we can't just be responsive to the business needs. We have to have some level of sort of mid to long term project type work that we fit in on the side as part of our role. Because if you're only dealing with the super urgent, so we're going to your question about prioritization, I'm probably not considered as the textbook way of prioritizing. Because what I do is I gamify it. So gamifying is different to prioritization.
Tell me more. You've totally got me now. Go on.
So when your brain's working on things, you may have really urgent tasks. You'll have really urgent, complex tasks. You may have some stuff that's a little bit easy. Sometimes your brain needs a break. Now, what are you going to do in that break? Are you going to go to the bathroom? Are you going to go and have a cup of tea? Or are you actually going to quickly read that email? Or are you going to quickly review that NDA? So traditionally they'd go, those aren't things that need to get done, but ultimately they are things that are stacking up and need to get done. So if you can break down these type of tasks and fit them in around other ones, you actually create a really good sense of self-satisfaction. So, with my team, we talk about blocking out time in our diary. So I use my diary and my calendar, I book meetings, and I block out time to work on stuff. Now, once you kind of get used to this whole way of organising your diary, you then start to realise what tasks don't quite take a full half an hour, or tasks don't take quite a full hour. And you know that actually you're probably going to get some time back. And in that time you get back, not only does that create a sense of satisfaction and winning within you because you've won time back, you then get to deal with a task that you didn't think you were going to do because it was never really a priority, but you're getting through that list of stuff. And so by prioritizing actively and getting through the stuff that the business needs, you're able to also do the other things that for you create space in your mind. And that I just find so much fun. It actually makes
that's so powerful. I love it. Putting it into a game and like just getting those things ticked off. I mean, I don't think there's any lawyer, business person, frankly, person alive that doesn't love a good ticking off like lists. But like extra, I love that idea of do the little things when you've got that little space and time. That's fabulous.
But you feel good about it. So rather than those little things, because the other way of doing it is you let all those little things add up to a half-hour task or an hour task, and then you do them in a chunk. But then it's boring because in your head there are loads of little things and you don't get that sense of winning because you've actually created a big space for these little things. But if you can take a little thing and fit it into a small space, you feel like you're winning. So that's definitely something that I do. And I do it in my own diary, my own free time. If I need to be organised, that's what I do, even with chores. So I've been doing it more recently now that, we're all in lockdown. It's like, here are some boring tasks I need to do, take the rubbish out, hang up the washing. But, sometimes just creating it as a task and achieving it, the psychology behind it makes it feel better.
I'll take the rubbish out at 5 minutes to my next meeting. Then I'll come back and I'll get it all ready. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I'll have my cup of tea then because I deserve it.
I love it. I'm a big fan of spreadsheets, and I'm a big fan of software. You're about to start a new place in your life, like a new what is the word? You're moving into a new opportunity. What would you, with a blank slate, what are the most important things that you would bring into any role, and what sort of I say software, like things that you're talking about, you know, spreadsheets. What's your like go-to? What's the first couple of things that you do in a new role? First 100 days. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it's that golden question. They say the first 90 days, don't they, what you're going to do. So I think, you know, what I actually do is I set up. So once I've got my email, I will sort of start to set up some folders, and I will have a spreadsheet that I give them reference numbers to. So I start to map out what's coming in. So if there's already emails there and there are work in them, I kind of I categorize that type of work. You know, which business area is it? Who's it come from? What's the time sensitivity? How long do I think it's going to take? And then that goes into my list. And I start to populate that list as I go around. So that's kind of the more reactive way of mapping what's coming through. I think the main thing is getting your face out there and meeting as many people as possible that are your key stakeholders, because the sooner you do that, the sooner the next interaction is going to be on the basis of a pre-existing relationship rather than something that's new. So instead of it being new, it's new, it's old with new, because you don't know what the issue is, but you know that person. Whereas if it's all new, you've got a double whammy to kind of deal with, and it could be a very, you know, time intensive or very urgent piece of work, and you're not going to be able to achieve getting to know that person because you've got to achieve that piece of work. So I think setting up those strategic meetings with those people where you're getting your face out there is really, really important. I also think that meeting your external advisors very early on is really important as well. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, which is I really like having those open conversations, not only with the business and my teams, but also the external counsel as well, which is, hey, new person coming in, take the shackles of anything that didn't work well before, and let's have those open conversations. At the same time, what I'm going to get from them, so I'm going to get them their view of the company, the key stakeholders, what they think's worked well, what hasn't worked well, what they've built for the last year to 3 years, what are the big projects that they've been involved in, what have they actually done to add value, and then what do they think and where do they think the company's going. So rather than me just having to do that all on my own accord, I'm getting true experts who should really know the company because they've supported it for the last 2, 5, 10 years, and they should have really been involved in some of those tricky legal areas, because generally, what do you outsource? You outsource areas of law that you don't have expertise in yourself, and you outsource things that you don't have the capacity to do yourself, and you think that maybe there's a more effective model that a law firm could do. So I think through that understanding of what they've been doing, you can see whether or not you agree with what they've been doing and whether that's the right blend of work. You also are able to look at your own strengths and weaknesses and judge them against the external talent pool you've got, as well as your internal resources. And you can start to think, well, look, I've got a fixed amount of time to add value. What's the best thing for me to be doing? Because actually I may be a great data protection lawyer, but if I know that the DPO in this next company is absolutely superb and is on it, and actually they've been really, really regimental in their process and they've actually just audited, well, I don't really need to kind of go into the kind of, you know, detail of things. Maybe I just need to see what the audit results were and work back from there. And actually I know that this person's already, you know, well versed in our templates in that area, so maybe that's not the best use of my time, irrespective of me coming in knowing, hey, I'm a good data protection expert. So I think it is really just, as I said before, listening and taking that in, but also mapping and documenting that information gathering exercise. And even down to, it's funny, I was talking to a couple of people who are partners in law firms, and one of the things that I always get, and especially in COVID times where, you know, how has your interaction been with your external counsel? Now, some of them have had those personal conversations over the phone, some have had the emails, and some of them have just had that mass marketing of COVID issues and here are the legal kind of things you need to know about it. And what's really worked well, probably not a lot of that. It's that personal kind of interaction and that really understanding you and what drives your business. So how are you going to get there if you don't actually have an open mind and you don't take away some of that arrogance? And I think that arrogance of approach comes across. So remember, when you're coming into a new business, the business operated before you got there. These things were getting done before you even were a twinkle in the recruiter's eye. So you coming in and going like you're the big high and mighty, you've come up with all these solutions, it's gonna get a few people's backs up. So it has to be that weaving of understanding what's been going on and saying, well, hey, this is what I can bring to you if you want it, and this is what I've got on offer, and marrying the two together, rather than, you know, I hate it when you see people come into businesses and they criticize their predecessor. I've seen it so much, especially in the legal profession. I just think it gives me an allergic reaction, because it's like, you weren't there, you don't know. You're so new, you've got no idea what those circumstances were. So yes, you may see a really poorly drafted contract, but was that the lawyer, or was that the business that owned that contract and did their own drafting? You don't know until you ask those questions. I think it really is a case of really opening your eyes and keeping your ears and eyes open, and getting that information, and starting to, when it feels right, and I'm going to assess this in a week's time and evaluate my findings. Probably not right, because what will emerge, patterns emerge. Patterns aren't forced. Other than those eye things that you do with, have you seen those magic eye posters where you have to, other than a magic eye poster, you can't force certain things coming together. It's not a factor of time. It's not an exact science. It depends on a number of myriads of information that eventually somehow converge together and create a kind of light bulb moment. So you've just got to just trust the process. And at some point, patterns will start to emerge, but then act on that. Have a think, have a conversation, and think about, where can you take that? You're noticing that there is a potential issue here. How are you going to deal with that? Or is it really an issue? Is it perceived as an issue? You might see it as an issue. The business might not know it yet. Do you really want to go in and go, "Hey, I found this problem"? Or do you actually want to do something a bit more subtle? And, generally when you're trying to introduce change or different ways of behaving, you've got to get people on side, and getting somebody's back up in the first interaction isn't the way to do it. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect at this at all, because I think we've all got our own personalities and styles, and they don't always blend with the people that you're working with. But I think it's just having that mindset and being cognitive that these are sort of things in your toolkit, and these are behavioural changes you might need to think about, I think is the key.
And I kind of hear your awareness of these issues. So, there's a load of things. I don't even get my laundry list out of things that I don't do very well, which I hear people going, and I'm like, I really ought to do that better than I do. Memory is one of mine, by the way. I wish I had a better memory, but I don't. That's why I have books like these, because I have to write everything down, because if I do not, then it's gone. And I remember it like 3 weeks later in the middle of the night, like, oh God, that thing. So I've learned those things. There are loads of things that we don't get right, but I do think that awareness of those things is such a key part of being able to admit it to ourselves, if not to others. Like, it's not something I do very well, because then we can have shortcuts to be able to support us with those things. Memory for you, it's like, well, actually that affects me in remembering what I've done. So actually I want to put things down time-wise, or making the use of my time, having stuff on there is really, really, really powerful. Are there any, I'm loath to ask you about software. Part of me wants to ask, because it's one of those topics that I'm always interested in people and what experiences they've had, but it's always so bespoke to the situation, because you can have it like somebody said, oh, you should use this, and it's like, actually that's not so helpful in this environment. But I wondered whether there's any software that you've used as an in-house lawyer that you go, could not live without.
Well, I think it goes without saying, practical law, and I think every single competent lawyer in the country has a subscription to it, because without it you can't dabble and create sort of documents in a quick fashion and have a really good synopsis of the law that's reliable. Yes, you can probably get this from reading around, but in a time intensive environment where actually coming up with answers quickly is important. You might want to do certain things a certain way, but actually time doesn't always permit that. So practical law is always one of those things. I think I'm loath to name software, because I'm still kind of foraying into different types of software. So for example, the startup that I'm helping at the moment at Havn, we use ClickUp for tasks. So before, I'd have my trusty spreadsheet that I felt I could program better. ClickUp does a similar amount of that in terms of the project management side of tasks, but I think it loses some of the data that I would sort of capture, because it's not quite organized in an as organized fashion as the way I would have labeled it. So that's something that is effective. And I think, it's a pretty cheap and easy piece of software to get. A lot of the tech startups have it. I think as a lawyer, you can probably quite easily, if you've never done that sort of thing before, map to that and get quite useful amounts of insights and data. Slack's another tool that I've been using recently, which, I think a lot of companies are moving away from, or actually I think it's actually making the waters a bit muddier, because you've got all these different ways of interacting, which means that you can't always capture some of that key information. So Slack's meant to be that kind of repository for whether it's a Google in Google Drive, so you've actually got a link to that document, whether it's an email where you talked about it, whether it's an interaction through a chat function in Slack, it all brings it under one umbrella. The thing for me though is that I can see that becoming a data monster, and it's going to get to a massive critical point where there's so much in it that isn't really organized in a structured fashion. How do you then strip it down and tidy it up again? I literally don't even want to think about that, because, you know, at least if you structure your data, you structure your stuff in a certain way, it's much easier to create some rules to kind of tidy it up. But there it's this behemoth of, you know, of the way in which you sort of deal with it. I think the thing that's important to me is, you know, yet again, assessing your own business and what tools are already available within the business in which you operate.
Right.
So if you know what kind of customer relationship management software you use, or what email platform you have, or whether you're using these kind of Slack tools or Google Hangouts or all these different things, what's already there and what are you trying to achieve with, you know, with what you're trying to do with tech? I think a lot of people go, I'd like some tech, they don't know why. And it's like, well, what problem are you trying to solve? What's your biggest pain point, or what are the things that you think would make your life easier? But I think, yet again, surveying what's already there is really important, because, you know, if, for example, your sales function uses Salesforce, well, you probably then want, if your customer contracts are going to sit in Salesforce, so they're going to be that connection, you want your document management system, that repository of all your contracts, to plug into Salesforce. And maybe Salesforce can do that for you. Maybe there's a really easy third-party plugin. But if you're going, actually, I'm going to have my own contracts database, it's going to sit standalone, and you invested in some technology, but actually it doesn't really interact with that other tool, which creates an environment which normally that end user that's in your marketing team, for example, that's their playing field, that's what they play in. If you go, actually, I want you to log into this system that doesn't look like it at all, it's just creating more barriers again. So I think the trick with tech is knowing what you've already got, knowing what you're trying to solve, and then, yet again, we're marrying all that together. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have a greenfield environment, then yeah, I'm sure there are certain things that I'd love to set up. HiQ is always one of those things I think about a lot, but I just haven't had the opportunity to implement. But it is, I think it's those programs that are trying to act as that dashboard for you, that plug in to a lot of different things, which mean that you're not going to reach end of life. You actually have something that's going to be you can trust it. It will still be there in 5 years, and it's going to give you that smart way and connected way of getting all that information from all these different things and giving you what you want. You're on mute, Joe.
Oh, mute. There we go. I was like talking away. Thank you, Natalie. You have done what you say on the tin. You've provided value. Like, you've provided so much value here, and I hope those people. I mean, because for me, what I see, certainly with small businesses, who are their own in-house lawyer a lot of the time. Like, small businesses are their own in-house lawyer, their own FD. I hope that they can listen to you and understanding some points like, oh, actually, yeah, could do that themselves. And of course, the in-house lawyers that are watching, I know they would have taken away some great tips, because you do talk about what it is you actually do. And that's what I love about listening to you, because I'm like, oh, that's a great, it's the sort of place where you end up writing notes when I'm listening to you, because I'm like, oh, that's a great idea, must remember that, must watch this video back for that. Thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you or want to hear more about what you're doing, how do we get in contact with you?
Well, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. You're always welcome to drop me a note, and we can kind of take it from there, really. But I'm always happy to help people, because, you know, ultimately I've been there myself. You know, we didn't always have those solid networks or people that were kind of putting themselves out there. Back when I started, when I was 27 and doing my first legal job, it was a bit trickier. But I think now there's a wealth of people out there that don't want to keep all that knowledge to themselves. They want to share their successes with others, and they want to help others and enable them to have an opportunity to do a better job than they once did. And the world wasn't always like that, but it definitely is now. And so I definitely encourage, if we're going to pay it forward, you know, let's all do it.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for being a part of this. For everybody that's watching, I hope you can join us for another Law and Business and Business and Law. You can subscribe here or here. Otherwise, we will see you again soon. Have a great day.